Supporters of globalization argue that improvements in communication and transportation have created a more open, tolerant and peaceful world. In the last 100 years, it has resulted in huge growth for global trade, as economies, people and cultures gradually integrated. But globalization hasn't been without its drawbacks, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has helped to push international relations to a breaking point. So, can globalization still bridge the world's economies together? I'm here at the International Monetary Fund's headquarters in Washington, D.C. to speak to the institution's chief economist on the topic.
The worst is yet to come.
Pierre-Olivier Garincha's warning from the IMF's World Economic Outlook underlined the significant slowdown in the global economy and the reliance on global trade to function. It's raised questions as to whether the many benefits of globalization outweigh the geopolitical problems it's helped create.
Globalization has delivered. That's the first thing we should realize. It's lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It's allowed the rise of emerging markets. It's on the back of a process of integration into the global economy. So in many ways, it has succeeded.
But the latest wave of globalization has seen a lot of pushback. As a result of technological advances, whole industries have been wiped out, causing mass job losses. Worker exploitation and a rise in inequality have also been, at least partly, attributed to globalization.
There are a number of people who have been suffering as the economy is changing, and how some local labor markets are facing competition from overseas and things like that. So these kinds of dislocations, we have to find better ways in which we can make sure that everyone is going to be benefiting going forward. And that's part of the reason why there is so much resentment, is that in a sense a lot of people feel like this is a train that left them behind. And so why should they vote for a process that has not benefited them?
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has, in Garincha's opinion, revealed underlying geopolitical tectonic plates. Imagine the two countries are tectonic plates that rub up against each other to create an earthquake. That earthquake has had a ripple effect on other tectonic plates. Think rising commodities prices, disrupted trade, a refugee crisis, and weaker economies thanks to central banks raising interest rates at a faster than expected pace. All rifts that have helped push the world's economies apart. Without intervention, these plates would become distinct economic blocks, with trade, currency and political systems that could unravel our current global economic order. And while the conflict between Russia and Ukraine may be the epicenter of the earthquake, the geopolitical tectonic plates that make up the globalized economy have been drifting apart for years. Major economies began to drop tariff rates on imports, and many nations entered into free trade agreements following a series of events after the Second World War, including a meeting in 1944 between 44 countries and the fall of the Soviet Union. But over the last 10 years, the backlash against globalization has fueled populist movements all around the world, which in many cases led to protectionist policies. Protectionism is the economic policy of restricting imports to shield a country's domestic industries from foreign competition. Data from Global Trade Alert show that protectionist trade policy interventions have been growing faster than liberalizing ones. The rise of China and other emerging market economies came about largely thanks to globalization, but this growing economic power may also be contributing to its fragmentation. Back in 2018, President Donald Trump accused China of unfair trading practices and intellectual property theft, and began to slap tariffs on China to encourage US consumers to buy American products. China hit back with its own tariffs and accused the US of trying to prevent it from becoming the world's dominant economic power.
Being a large economic power comes great responsibilities, and I think by and large the Chinese authorities are very cognizant of that. Global discussions are taking place. That needs to continue, and that needs to be reinforced, and we need to get past sort of the tensions that might be arising. There is a rebalancing of economic power and governance that is taking place. We've had this slow process over the last 40 years. There's the rise of emerging markets. As their economic power increases, there is a need for an adjustment in the way we address and deal with global problems. And so it was bound to happen that there would be little rifts and, the plates would start moving apart.
According to Garinchas, the rise in these countries' economic might was not matched by a similar rise in their financial and global institutional firepower. That's in part down to the dominance of the US dollar, but the US's share of global output is likely to decline due to the growth in emerging markets.
We're coming out from a period where we had very strong dominance from one country and groups of countries. But we have to plan and organize a transition to this multipolar world.
A multipolar world is one where there are more than two centers of power. In theory, it would allow emerging economies to better retain and protect the benefits of globalization. But whether the US and China, the world's superpowers, would agree to that transition is unclear.
This is complicated. This is difficult. This is, there's a new seat at the table. And so how we organize this in a way that is beneficial for everyone is really the challenge that we're facing.
And as these hypothetical tectonic plates move away from each other, Garinchas argues we'll need more bridges between them, not less. Bridges like the IMF.